Have you ever poured your heart into someone who only gave you fragments in return, tiny pieces of warmth that never lasted long enough to feel real? You waited, hoping crumbs would turn into care, but all they did was keep you hungry. Until one day, silence became your only answer. Not anger, not revenge, just peace. Stay, and let's see what silence reveals. As we step into the first chapter, imagine this: someone standing at the edge of noise, surrounded by messages unanswered, questions left hanging, and memories that no longer echo back. The air feels heavy, not from words, but from their absence. There's a strange kind of power, quiet, yet undeniable. That's where silence begins to take shape, not as retreat, but as command. We've all been there, waiting for someone who gives us pieces instead of presence. Little gestures that feel like care, but never last long enough to heal. We cling to them, thinking more effort will balance the scale. Yet the more we reach, the more the balance tilts away. It's a subtle prison, the kind built not from walls, but from expectations. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." It's a reminder that what binds us isn't the other person's neglect, it's our reaction to it. When you first stop responding, it doesn't feel like wisdom. It feels like withdrawal. Your fingers itch to explain, to clarify, to prove your worth. That's the mind's final rebellion before it surrenders to clarity. And clarity always begins in silence. Each moment of restraint becomes a small victory, invisible to others, but monumental within. The stillness feels unbearable at first because you mistake it for emptiness. But it isn't emptiness. It's space. Space where your strength begins to breathe again. Now imagine this space as a battlefield, not of shouting or blame, but of rhythm. Every relationship, every conversation runs on an unspoken tempo. Someone leads, someone follows, someone dictates the beat. And in most cases, it's the one who reacts first who loses control. That's where Stoicism lives, in the pause between stimulus and response. Epictetus wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Freedom, then, is not the absence of conflict, it's the mastery of rhythm. Think of your silence as the metronome. When you stop rushing to fill every gap, others must adjust to your pace. The one who can hold stillness begins to control the tempo of the room. That pause unsettles people because they can no longer read you. You become unreadable, and unreadable means untouchable. The more you resist the urge to fill the silence, the heavier your presence becomes. People lean into it. They start to reveal themselves, not through what they say, but through what they do when you say nothing. I once knew someone who couldn't stand silence. The moment a conversation paused, they'd rush to fill it. Jokes, stories, confessions, anything to escape the discomfort. Over time, you could see the pattern. Their words weren't connection. They were camouflage, covering the fear of being unseen. One day, I decided to mirror their silence. Just a small experiment. And in that pause, their truth spilled out, not through speech, but through restlessness. That's when I understood what Marcus meant when he wrote, "Silence is a lesson learned from many sufferings." When you stop reacting, people begin to face their own echoes. Some call it manipulation. The Stoic calls it clarity, because silence doesn't expose others, it reveals truth. It shows who values peace and who fears it. The ones who only stayed because you kept reaching out will drift away. Let them. Their absence is not a loss. It's the natural quieting of noise that never served you. What remains is the rare kind of stillness that holds its own weight. you start to notice the difference between love and dependency. Love grows in mutual respect. Dependency feeds on reaction. When your peace depends on another's rhythm, that's not affection, it's conditioning. Seneca once wrote, "He who is brave is free." Courage in this sense isn't the act of confrontation. It's the refusal to need approval. It's choosing stillness even when your ego begs for sound. At first, people mistake your calm for coldness. They call it distance, indifference, pride. Let them. The Stoic knows that calm is not detachment from life, but attachment to reason. Your silence isn't a wall, it's a filter. It lets truth through and leaves behind everything that doesn't belong. The same stillness they misinterpret as withdrawal is actually discipline in disguise. Over time, something subtle happens. The energy shifts. The one who used to pull the strings now hesitates. The one who expected you to chase begins to linger. They replay old conversations in their mind, searching for the rhythm that once made them feel powerful. But it's gone, because you've stopped dancing to their tune. And without your reaction, their illusion loses its music. You might think silence is passive. It's not. It's the most precise move in emotional chess. It's not about withholding words. It's about holding yourself. Because once you stop explaining, the world starts to listen differently. They lean in, not out of curiosity, but out of respect. The stillness you hold becomes gravity. It draws truth to the surface effortlessly. And as that truth surfaces, something even deeper begins to form, a sense of independence that no apology or validation can touch. You no longer need to prove your worth through attention. You no longer measure connection through noise. You begin to understand the hidden rule of power. The one who owns his reaction owns the entire game. From here, silence no longer feels like a void. It becomes a message, a boundary, a declaration that says, "I choose peace over participation." You realize you don't have to fight for dignity. You embody it. You don't have to demand respect. You live in a way that commands it naturally. The calm that once felt unbearable becomes your armor, your rhythm, your identity. And that's the turning point. The moment when silence stops being the absence of noise and becomes the presence of strength. When your restraint is no longer a tactic, but a truth. When you finally see that in a world addicted to reaction, your stillness is rebellion. Because silence, when mastered, doesn't retreat, it reigns. And from that calm, everything begins to shift. Now, as we move deeper, let's see what happens when silence not only protects you, but transforms you. Moving into the second chapter, picture this. Two people standing in the quiet after a storm. One still speaks in thunder, the other has learned to breathe in silence. What happens next is not a conversation, it's a shift in gravity. Because every bond, every argument, every connection is secretly a game of rhythm. Someone leads, someone follows, someone reacts, someone observes. And the truth is simple yet brutal. The one who reacts first loses control. We live in a world addicted to reaction. A world where instant replies feel like proof of worth. Where people chase response times like oxygen. You message, they reply. You wait, they disappear. And somehow, that silence burns worse than anger. But here's the thing, the silence only hurts when you still crave control. The Stoics understood this long before screens or messages existed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wasn't talking about detachment from life. He was talking about rhythm, about who decides when the music stops. When you begin to master your silence, something subtle yet profound occurs. You stop dancing to their beat. Your stillness becomes the tempo. Every unread message becomes a statement. I no longer move on command. Every unspoken reply becomes a boundary drawn in invisible ink. This isn't pride, it's discipline. You're not punishing anyone, you're protecting your balance. Because the moment you start controlling your reactions, you start conducting the entire interaction. I remember a friend who once told me, if I don't reply, they'll think I don't care. And I said, if you always reply, they'll never learn what care means. That's the paradox of silence. It teaches through absence. It reveals what's real when all performance stops. Most people fear that pause because it leaves them face to face with themselves. But a Stoic doesn't fear silence. He uses it. Because silence forces truth to surface. The impatient reveal their restlessness. The manipulative expose their need for control. The genuine simply stay. Think of life as psychological chess. The impatient player always moves first. They react to emotion, not intention. The wise player, however, studies the board. He waits for clarity. He understands that a single move made from composure outweighs 10 made from impulse. That's Stoicism in motion, not withdrawal, but precision. Seneca wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." In that pause, emotion softens into observation. Observation becomes understanding, and understanding becomes power. The quiet kind that doesn't shout, doesn't chase, doesn't need to prove. There's a story about a craftsman who once worked beside a waterfall. The noise was endless. Yet over the years, he learned to carve in rhythm with it, never against it. People asked him how he endured the chaos. He said, "I stopped fighting the noise. I let it teach me where the silence hides." That's the Stoic way. Life will never go quiet on its own. You must find your stillness within the roar. And once you do, you stop being moved by the volume around you. When someone provokes you, they're not just testing your patience. They're testing your rhythm. They want to pull you into their chaos because chaos gives them control. The moment you react, you lose the tempo. But when you hold your line, when you breathe instead of burst, their strategy collapses. They stumble in confusion, not because you won, but because you refuse to play. That's the quiet authority Stoicism cultivates, not dominance over others, but dominion over self. This is where emotional intelligence meets ancient wisdom. The Stoic doesn't chase validation, applause, or revenge. He doesn't manipulate silence to wound others. He holds it like a shield. Because silence, when rooted in self-mastery, isn't passive, it's active restraint. It's saying, I choose not to give my peace away. In a world where everyone is shouting to be heard, the calm one commands the room, not by volume, but by presence. You might feel misunderstood. They might call your calm arrogance, your pause indifference. Let them. A lion doesn't roar to prove it's strong. It simply walks, and everything adjusts around its pace. Your composure will unsettle those who depend on your reaction to feel powerful. They will test you with silence, with sarcasm, with guilt. But each time you remain grounded, their need for control weakens. You are not ignoring them, you are teaching them that your energy is not free currency. The Stoics spoke often of the inner citadel, the fortress within that no chaos can breach. When you respond to provocation with stillness, you're building its walls brick by brick. Every restraint is a stone. Every pause is a gate closed to impulse. Epictetus reminded his students, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone.' That's not pride, that's power dressed as calm." From here, your silence becomes more than protection, it becomes precision. You begin to see patterns others miss. You notice who truly listens and who simply waits to speak. You realize that words can be weapons, but silence is architecture. It shapes what remains after noise fades. When you no longer chase the rhythm of others, you discover your own. It's slower, steadier, cleaner. It holds no desperation. And this rhythm, this inner tempo, becomes your compass. It keeps you steady when the world pulls you toward reaction. You stop living on borrowed emotion. You begin to act from grounded intention. And slowly, the balance of power shifts, not because you took it from anyone, but because you stopped giving it away. So when the world demands an instant response, pause, let the silence stretch, let it breathe, watch what happens next. You'll see the restless stumble, the loud grow quieter, and the truth step forward uninvited. That's the invisible game most never learn, the art of leading by not reacting, of winning without striking, of holding your peace so firmly that no one can steal it. Because the one who masters his rhythm doesn't just survive chaos, he conducts it. From here we move deeper into the heart of detachment itself, where love without need and peace without dependence reveal the true face of strength. Now imagine standing before a mirror that doesn't show your reflection, but your patterns. Every word you once spoke, every chase, every explanation you gave away, hoping to be understood. Then, one day, the mirror turns silent, and for the first time, you're forced to face what remains when noise disappears. This is where silence becomes not a shield, but a teacher. There's a strange transformation that happens when you stop reacting. The world begins to echo. Every absence you create starts to reveal truth. At first, you think silence will drive others away. Sometimes it does. But what truly fades is not people, it's illusion. The illusion that you needed to hold everything together. The illusion that peace depended on someone else's attention. The Stoics called this awakening the moment when reason returns to its throne. It's the turning of the soul from dependence to command. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Look within." Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig. Silence is the act of digging. Each quiet moment becomes a shovel that unearths what you once buried under fear, longing, and noise. The more you sit in that stillness, the clearer the water becomes. You begin to see how much of your peace was spent on proving your worth. How much of your strength was poured into battles that didn't need to be fought, and how many of your wounds were reopened just to feel seen. I remember a time when I kept chasing answers that would never come. I believed that if I just spoke clearly enough, cared hard enough, or waited long enough, someone would finally understand. But silence taught me something language never could. Not everyone is meant to meet you in your depth. Some only swim in shallow waters. And when you keep diving for them, you drown in the process. That's when I realized silence isn't rejection, it's reflection. It's a mirror that shows not who hurt you, but who you've become while reaching for them. When you withdraw, not in anger but in awareness, you stop orbiting their gravity. You start to see how your own patterns trapped you in the cycle of craving, chasing, explaining. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And he was right. Most of our pain doesn't come from what was done to us. It comes from the stories we keep telling ourselves after. Silence ends the story. It's tempting to see silence as a weapon, but a Stoic knows it's a window. When you stop reacting, the other person begins to see their own reflection too. The calm you hold unsettles those who rely on your reaction to define their importance. They begin to face themselves, something most people spend their lives avoiding. But here's the difference. Your goal isn't to make them uncomfortable. Your goal is to see clearly, to separate noise from truth. In the stillness, you notice who reaches out once you stop reaching first. You notice who stands with you when there's no benefit, who remains when there's no performance. Silence cleans the room of false company. It leaves behind those who understand peace without needing constant proof. That's the beauty of the mirror effect. It doesn't expose others to punish them. It reveals truth so you can choose with wisdom. There's a quiet strength that grows in the one who can sit alone without panic. The Stoics called it self-command, the art of being your own anchor when the sea turns rough. Epictetus once said, "No great thing is created suddenly." The same applies to composure. It's built in silence, through repetition, through restraint. Every time you resist the urge to explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you, you win back a piece of your freedom. Let me tell you this, peace is not granted, it's reclaimed. You reclaim it every time you choose stillness over chaos. Every time you decide that your energy is not an open door for everyone to enter. Every time you recognize that your response is your last line of defense. People will test it. They will call your calm coldness. They will provoke, accuse, and project. Let them. The Stoic knows that reaction is surrender. You cannot fight every battle without losing the war for your own mind. When silence becomes your nature, something extraordinary happens. The person who once made you question your worth now fades into the background. Not because they changed, but because you did. You no longer feed their importance with your attention. You no longer measure your peace by their apology. You stop needing them to fix the wound because you've already outgrown it. The moment you detach, the dynamic dissolves, and what remains is strength without bitterness. In that state, silence evolves from being the absence of words to being the presence of wisdom. It becomes a language only the grounded can speak. The longer you stay there, the more magnetic you become, not because you seek to attract, but because serenity has gravity. People feel it, they sense it, and those still bound to chaos can't understand it, so they call it mystery. But what they feel isn't mystery, it's mastery. Detachment, then, is not about turning cold, it's about turning clear. You stop bleeding emotion into people who haven't earned your depth. You start pouring that energy back into yourself, your craft, your discipline, your growth. You build the life you once tried to find in someone else's attention. That's what the Stoics meant by freedom, not isolation, but sovereignty. At this stage, you begin to see life differently. Every silence becomes a test. Every urge to react becomes a moment to practice strength. The game you once thought was about winning someone back becomes about mastering yourself. You start to see that peace isn't the end of conflict. It's the art of not needing to engage in one. And that's the quiet revolution, when you no longer seek closure from others because you've already closed the door within yourself. When your stillness no longer demands recognition, when your composure is not a performance, but a way of being. The Stoic rises here, not in the noise of conquest, but in the quiet of command. Because in the end, silence doesn't punish anyone. It frees you, it breaks illusions, exposes truth, and rebuilds the soul brick by brick. The one who can hold it holds everything. Now, as we move forward, let's see how this silence transforms from reflection into rebirth, where detachment becomes not an ending, but the beginning of a stronger, freer self. At this stage, picture a calm lake after the storm. The waves that once crashed violently have disappeared, leaving only stillness, and in that stillness, reflection. You no longer see the chaos that once surrounded you. You see yourself, not the version built by reaction, but the one restored by restraint. This is where detachment stops being escape and becomes evolution. The moment you choose silence, not as punishment, but as peace, something begins to shift. Those who once felt in control of your emotions start to feel the emptiness of their own. The conversations they used to dominate now echo back unanswered. The attention they once demanded no longer arrives. And yet, your goal isn't to make them miss you. It's to stop missing yourself. The Stoic doesn't withdraw to wound others. He steps back to regain command of his own rhythm. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." True power doesn't rise from resentment. It grows from restraint. Detachment, then, is not a cold wall. It's the quiet decision to protect your energy from chaos, to stop letting your peace depend on another person's behavior. When you reach this point, the dynamic changes without effort. You no longer fight to prove your value. You embody it. It's strange how silence reveals what noise could never show. At first, it feels empty, almost unbearable. You want to fill it with explanation, closure, or validation. But every time you resist that urge, your self-control deepens. Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity." And silence, make no mistake, is adversity. It tests your discipline more than conflict ever could. But once you endure it, it transforms from isolation into clarity. I once met a woman who said, "I stopped replying, and that's when I finally started hearing." She wasn't talking about others, she was talking about herself. Beneath all the noise, she rediscovered her own voice. It wasn't angry, it wasn't loud. It was calm, deliberate, and complete. That's what detachment gives you, the ability to hear your own mind again after being drowned in others' expectations. The Stoics believed in apatheia, a state of serenity that comes not from avoidance, but from alignment. You don't escape emotion, you master it. You don't suppress attachment, you purify it. You learn to care without craving, to love without losing yourself, to engage without becoming dependent on outcome. That's detachment, not emptiness, but wholeness. When you reach this level of calm, something remarkable happens. The same silence that once made you anxious now becomes your anchor. You stop seeking closure from people who were never meant to give it. You stop chasing explanations from those who don't value understanding. And you realize that peace doesn't need permission to exist, it only needs protection. People may return when they feel your absence. They may try to reignite the rhythm you've already broken. But the Stoic doesn't fall back into old patterns. He responds, if he must, from discipline, not emotion. Epictetus reminded us, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. When you no longer react, you rise above the cycle completely. Detachment teaches you that control was never about others. It was always about yourself. You can't stop the storm outside, but you can build walls within that no wind can breach. You stop depending on validation to feel alive. You stop seeing rejection as loss. You start seeing it as direction, and that shift from clinging to choosing, is where strength is born. So, when someone asks how you remain so calm, tell them this: you stopped feeding chaos with attention. You learned to let silence speak where words once failed. And in doing so, you discovered a truth that no one can take from you. Peace isn't found in what you hold on to. It's found in what you're willing to release. Because in the end, detachment isn't about walking away. It's about standing still while the world spins and realizing you no longer need to chase it. From here, imagine standing at the edge of your own life. No noise, no chase, no explanations left to give. Just breath, just calm. The same silence that once felt unbearable now feels like home. This is where the journey of control ends and the empire of self begins. At first, silence was survival. Then it became strength. Now it's something greater: freedom. You no longer measure peace by who stays or leaves. You no longer let someone's chaos rewrite your calm. What once felt like loss now feels like liberation. Because when you stop reacting, you stop revolving around others. And when you stop revolving, you return to your own center. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul." That's the destination silence was leading you to all along. Not revenge, not victory, but serenity. You start to see that life was never about winning power over others. It was about reclaiming power over yourself. I remember a man who told me he finally found peace the day he stopped waiting for closure. I realized, he said, I didn't need their apology. I needed my own forgiveness for giving away so much of me. That's the Stoic awakening. You stop demanding answers and start living the lesson. You stop chasing clarity from others and begin creating it within. Seneca wrote, "He who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior." Conquest, in Stoic terms, isn't about defeating others, it's about mastering impulse. To stay calm when provoked, to remain kind when ignored, to stand firm when misunderstood. These are not small victories. They are the quiet revolutions that rebuild your soul. As your silence deepens, so does your clarity. You begin to move differently. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. You no longer explain peace, you embody it. The person who once drained your energy now fades into insignificance, not because you blocked them, but because you outgrew them. Growth doesn't need to announce itself. It reveals itself through composure. When you stop needing validation, you become unshakable. When you stop fearing solitude, you become whole. The one who gave you crumbs no longer haunts your thoughts. They taught you something priceless, the difference between attachment and alignment. What once felt like rejection was redirection toward yourself. And that's where true Stoic power lives, not in control, but in clarity, not in domination, but in discipline. You no longer need to prove that you've moved on, you simply have. You no longer need to show strength, you are strength. So let the silence stretch, let it breathe, let it become the space where your calm lives and grows. Because the world no longer dictates your rhythm, you do. And from that stillness, you build something no one can take, peace that endures. This is the Stoic victory, not the conquest of others, but the quiet command of self. The storm passes, the noise fades, and what remains is you, steady, whole, and free. At this stage, imagine walking back through the ruins of everything you once tried to hold together. The noise, the chase, the endless reaching, it's all quiet now. What remains isn't emptiness, it's clarity. The silence that once haunted you now carries meaning. You no longer search for peace, You live it, quietly, deliberately. The Stoics taught that every storm ends twice, once outside you and once within. The first is the world calming down. The second is your soul remembering that it was never broken. That's where you stand now, in the second silence, the kind that no one can disturb. The same stillness that once felt like exile now feels like arrival. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "To live each day as if it were your last, without frenzy, without apathy, without pretense. That's the essence of this quiet mastery. You no longer spend your strength reacting to noise. Each step now comes from intention, not impulse. Peace isn't something you ask for, it's something you practice. You begin to see life through a cleaner lens. Some people will never apologize, some stories will never close, some things will remain uncertain forever. And yet, none of that has the power to disturb you anymore, because your peace doesn't depend on completion. It depends on command. The command over how you choose to perceive, to respond, to stay composed while the world trembles. I once met an old craftsman who carved marble in silence. He said, "You can't rush the stone. It only reveals its shape to patience." That's Stoic wisdom disguised as craft. Life, like stone, only reveals meaning to the one who stays steady long enough to see it emerge. You've learned to do that, to wait without suffering, to pause without fear, to hold without clinging. Seneca said, "He suffers more who expects suffering before it comes." You used to live in that expectation, waiting for someone's silence to mean rejection, for distance to mean loss. Now you understand, silence isn't the absence of connection, it's the presence of understanding. You no longer need noise to feel alive. You've learned that serenity is not the lack of struggle, but the strength to face it without breaking. As you walk forward, notice how everything moves slower. You listen more, you speak less, you choose your energy like a craftsman chooses his tools, precisely, deliberately. You're not guarding your peace out of fear anymore, you're shaping it out of wisdom. The same restraint that once felt heavy now feels like power. Because silence, when owned, is no longer a void. It's a language. It speaks for you in rooms you no longer enter. It travels farther than any argument ever could. And the ones who once thrived on your reaction will feel it, not as punishment, but as a reminder of what they lost. The calm they couldn't create, the peace they couldn't disturb. So here you are, not seeking closure, not waiting to be seen, but standing as proof that strength doesn't shout. It breathes, it endures, it stays, and when the world grows loud again, as it will, you'll know what to do. You'll return to the silence that built you. You'll hold it, wear it, live it. Because now you understand, silence was never about retreat. It was always about return. Return to yourself, to composure, to freedom. That's the final lesson. The one the Stoics whispered through centuries. The power you seek isn't out there. It's in the calm you refuse to abandon. So when the world grows loud again, remember, the calm you carry is not escape. It's your return home. Every silence you've held was never weakness, it was growth. The calm you carry now is your freedom, the quiet proof that you've mastered yourself. If this message stayed with you, subscribe to keep walking this path of strength. Comment below, inner peace. Your journey toward calm clarity continues in the next lesson.